Hello, everyone. Here we are. We're going to probably finish the book of Matthew. There are 28 chapters. We're on chapter 26. So let's get started. We remember that the last thing we heard about were the 10 virgins, 5 of them foolish and 5 of them wise, who had extra jars. They each had an extra jar of oil for their lamps. And when the bridegroom came, they went into the wedding feast with him, and the door was shut. And the foolish virgins who had to go buy oil somewhere, when they came back, the door was shut and it was too late. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're not foolish, that we're ready, and that doesn't happen to us, that we get shut out of the blessing. Okay, so here we go. Matthew 26. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Now, bear in mind, they still don't really get what he's saying to them. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. So they were very aware that the people loved Jesus. While Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. "Why this waste?" they asked. "This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor." Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She's done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you'll always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial." Now, this must have just really freaked them out, because they really don't get it. "Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she's done will also be told in memory of her." And here we are reading it. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. I feel, woe to the betrayer in any situation. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" He replied, "Go into the city to a certain man and tell him, the teacher says, my appointed time is near. I'm going to celebrate the Passover with my disciples at your house." So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them and prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. Now, they often lay down to eat, on their side, and the table was low, and they ate their food that way. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad and began to say to him, one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Jesus answered, "You've said so." While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he'd given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he'd given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus told them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me, for it's written, quote, 'I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered.'" And we just read that in the Old Testament. "But after I've risen, I'll go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter replied, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." "Truly, I tell you," Jesus answered, "this very night before the rooster crows, you'll disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, "Even if I have to die with you, I'll never disown you." And all the other disciples said the same. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." You can imagine how scared he was. Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so you won't fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." Now that is incredible discipline. How often do we say things like that? How often do we ever say, "Okay, all right, I volunteer, I'll do this thing"? I mean, most of the time we're terrified and hedging and trying to find a way to not go through something. When he came back, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I can't call on my Father and he'll at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say that it must happen this way?" Put your sword back in its place. In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you've come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you didn't arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Trying not to sneeze. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the teachers of the law, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they didn't find any, though many false witnesses came forward. See, there's always people willing to be false witnesses. Isn't that interesting? They're literally willing to lie. I don't know if it's just sport to them, but we're seeing a lot of it today. Okay, so Nothing's new under the sun, all right? Finally, two came forward and declared, "This fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you're the Messiah, the Son of God." "You've said so," Jesus replied. "But I say to all of you, from now on, you'll see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He's spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you've heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" "He's worthy of death," they answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, "Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you?" Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath. "I don't know this man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken, "Before the rooster crows, you'll disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. Matthew 27. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. "I have sinned," he said, "for I've betrayed innocent blood." "What's that to us?" they said. "That's your responsibility." So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the coins and said, "It's against the law to put this into the treasury since it's blood money." So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That's why it's been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field as the Lord commanded me. End quote. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Hold on, I want to go right back to this. I want to mention, Judas went and hung himself. Can you imagine the self-hatred you would have if you realized, if the full weight of what you had done hit you? All right. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they're bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. I'm telling you, there's a time when you're just quiet. There's no point in saying anything. They're going to get done what they've got in mind to do. Now, it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd, and also Jesus is letting everything be fulfilled, okay? At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he knew it was out of self-interest that they'd handed Jesus over to him. Now remember, Pilate is Roman, okay? He's not a Jew, but he's the governor over the Jews. And he's like, these Jews, they're doing this for their own self-interests, okay? So he's giving an option, like, do you want me to release this murderer or do you want to release Jesus? He's trying to give them a way out. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him a message. "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I've suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. That's how much they hated the truth. They'd rather have a murderer released than have someone who was telling them the truth about their hypocrisy. "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who's called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. Now that's very cowardly, really. And it didn't save him. I read that they don't really know what happened to Pilate, but conjecture is that he committed suicide. I mean, to me, this is very cowardly. Like, okay, you're going to do this ugly thing, and I know it's ugly. I'm going to wash my hands so I'm not looked at by God as part of it. And it's like, no, you're part of it. You're letting this happen instead of standing in your authority. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It's your responsibility." What an ugly thing to do, to wash your hands. Can you imagine Jesus watching the one who has the power wash his hands of the whole situation? I mean, you would just know, I'm on my way to the cross, which he knew anyway. But, watching people fall down like this, fall short like this. "I'm innocent of this man's blood. It's your responsibility." All the people answered, "His blood is on us and on our children." And boy, has it been. Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. Now, this is all Roman, okay? They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and you can be sure these Pharisaical Jews are just snickering behind their hands that Jesus is now with the Romans and just going to be crucified like a common criminal. This is what the world does to truth tellers, okay? This is how badly this world doesn't want to hear the truth, and this is why it stands condemned. And it puts in perspective the ones that are called out of it that are going to be saved. Some of us will get out with our lives, and some of us won't, but we will be saved. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus to the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. How evil. Woe to the one who twisted that crown of thorns. Whose evil idea was that? Then they put a staff in his right hand, and then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said, because they're following the lead of the Jewish people. They figure if the Jews hate him, we'll hate him all the more, because he's Jewish and they hate him. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they'd mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And this is how you can view that. God is the king over the battlefield of the mind, crucified on top of the place of the skull, okay? And the mind is in the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, so that would be vinegar. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are," so mocking, and we know this kind of mocking by the liberal mob, "you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you're the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, because they had no idea what the plan was and what he had to do. In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. That's how kind these priests are. These ones who teach the law and are supposed to be examples, they're showing their hypocrisy right here, mocking him. I mean, how disgusting. And I'm sure they were saying, this fellow has nothing to do with the God we serve. We're in the right. He's some rebel, crazy person. It's that insanity of sin. So here's how they were mocking him. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the king of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross and we will believe in him. And we'll believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, I'm the Son of God. In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. Talk about getting it from all sides. He just didn't have a friend in that moment. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? So he was feeling God pulling back from him so that it could all be done, so that he could pay that price, because he had now had the sins of the world on him. And we know that God cannot be near unholiness. So God had pulled away. This doesn't mean God didn't love his son. This doesn't mean that God wasn't crying. This means this is how it had to go, okay? Jesus had to feel what it is like to be thrown into outer darkness, into the darkest pits of hell. Jesus had to go through that, okay? And that's what he's feeling here, because that's what's going to be screamed in hell. God, why have you forsaken me? The people in hell are shaking their fists at God, saying, you did this to me, when in fact it was their own sin that did it to them and caused God to separate himself from them, because a holy God cannot be near evil and sinfulness and filthiness like that, okay? So Jesus, we think that he doesn't understand what's happening when he says this, but in reality, he's exemplifying what they're saying in hell and what everyone who goes there will be saying. God, why have you left me here? That's the first person they're going to cry out to when they realize they're in outer darkness with hell is no presence of God anymore. Right now, we're living in the presence of God, the evil and the good. The sun is rising, the seasons change, we're enjoying all the beauty of earth, all of us together. But when you get thrown into the outer darkness, God has removed himself from you, and then you will know why it's utterly dark and what it feels like for God to leave you. I pray to God, I never feel that. I mean, I don't think I will be. If we're saved, we're not going to feel that. I don't ever want to feel something like that. I couldn't live without God, all right? But people on earth today think they can, and then they're going to, okay? So, Jesus knows that God, in that moment, Jesus is saying, why have you forsaken me? Exemplifying what the cry will be from hell. Don't feel bad, okay? Because if you just think about the cruelty of the liberal mob, you know why they're there. Okay, because of that kind of mocking. They were having a good old time harming and hurting everybody else with their mocking, because it hurts to be called a racist when you simply state your opinion. Okay, and that's just an example of the kind of hurt we've been through for the last 5 years. All right, and Jesus is ultimately hurt here. I feel like crying. And Jesus is feeling that separation. So, okay, you get it. When some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus, because he had said, Eli, Eli, but I believe that the name Elijah probably means, let's just look it up really quick. Pardon my digression. Elijah, name, meaning. Yahweh is my God. Okay, so he's saying, Eli, Eli. And they're saying, oh, look at this. And let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. God, that must have been so mentally, emotionally painful to go through that. I mean, the physical pain was obviously a nightmare, but at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and that curtain was about 3 feet thick. Literally huge. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection. Do you understand how powerful this is? And went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely this was the Son of God." Many women were there watching from a distance. They'd followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, his mother, because James and Joseph were brothers to Jesus, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. She was the one that knelt in front of Jesus and said, "Let my sons sit on your right and your left." As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. And he was a rich man. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. The next day, now the other Mary, that might have been the Mary who was the sister of Martha, but the one where it says Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, that's Jesus's mother. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he's been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first." "Take a guard," Pilate answered. "Go make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. Not going to work. All right, Matthew 28. After the Sabbath at dawn on the 1st day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, I'm sure this is the sister of Martha, went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He's risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he's risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You're to say, 'His disciples came during the night and stole him away while you were asleep.' If this report gets to the governor, we'll satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. I've met Jewish people who believe that the disciples stole the body. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." So let's remember that, okay? I love you very much. Stay clean, and with the Lord, walk strong, okay? Don't falter. Hold on to his hand and let him guide you through the minefield that is appearing before us in this world, okay? It started with the hatred and the slings and arrows coming hard and fast. And it started with that hatred of one man. Hatred is evil. And now we're in a minefield, all of us. If you're vaxxed, you're not safe from the government. Nobody's safe, okay? I mean, to think that the government is pleased with you is to think wrongly. I love you very much. Please pray for me. I'm praying for you. And just an aside, if for some reason you don't see me tomorrow, it's because my payment for my Comcast didn't go through on time. Let's hope it does. If it doesn't, though, I'm thinking they're probably going to shut off my internet. So don't worry, okay? I will be back as soon as I can, and just pray that that payment goes through. I love you very much. Good night.